So I've got something pretty special in-house today. We have a 5510 Big Crown Submariner. This is a very interesting and a very important watch. This is one of 5 pieces known to exist. And one of the things that I love so much about 5510 as a reference is that it's still a big crown, but it has the 1530 caliber movement, which is one of my favorite movements to work on. I put it on the time grapher to get some pre-test results, and as you can see, it's running really bad. Rate obviously is very off. The amplitude of 180 is a good 100 less than it should be. It could be something fairly simple, like just needing to be cleaned and lubricated, but it could be something more complicated, like the center hull is ovalized, which is a very common thing for these movements. It could be that the barrel needs to be bushed for the lower end of the barrel. It may need a new pallet fork. If the pallet fork's damaged at all, it may need, and most likely will need, a hairspring adjustment. So it looks like we have our work cut out for us. Definitely needs barrel bushing. There's way too much shake on that barrel. Looking at the hairspring, it is definitely out of flat, so it's going to need some adjustment. On these older gear trains, they actually tend to be a little different color-wise. You see, this is almost like a pink gold, whereas this is sort of more of a brass, it's like coppery. So these 2 gears are original. This one's probably been replaced. This is kind of stuck in there, actually, this one. We're just going to leave that then, and then I'll come back and get it after I remove the barrel. So all these lubricants have sort of dried up and created sort of shellacs. This wheel should just normally come out nice and easily, but it's not. We're just going to push it out from this side gently. I'll probably end up rebushing, or at least installing a bushing here. Okay, just cleaning off the main plate before we reinstall the balance. These are referred to as butterfly rotors. Very cool. All right, let's get this thing ready for on the SolidWorks. One thing that people sometimes forget is that these plates, the base plate, the bridges, they're brass that's plated with rhodium, which is that shiny silver color. And as these watches age, as they're serviced repeatedly, that rhodium plating wears away. It leaves some more dull coloration. It doesn't mean the movement is dirty, it just means that the rhodium plating is not as bright as it initially was. But that's not going to impact servicing. I'm actually going to ream out this area of the main plate for the installation of a lower barrel bushing, and that will help to assure proper end shake, side shake, etc. of the barrel. Okay, so that is through, but now we have to countersink to remove the burr that created. 0.6, so we're set up at 1.5. I'll keep the 1.5 pusher, but I will put a 1.6 stump. Bring it down just a hair. That's good to go. Getting started on rebuilding, but before we do that, we're going to lubricate the jewels of the escape wheel. Interesting. Somebody changed out the type of spring. Probably restore that to its proper type. Probably they broke the original one and then didn't have in stock, so then they forced that one in, which is already disappeared. Let's see. I was getting ready for it to fly across the room, which it still might do, but So far we're good. Now comes the moment of truth. Gonna put this cap jewel, this new one, lay it flat, and then we need to guide our new spring backwards, and then put the tab in. It's in. Whew. So we've got an entirely replaced jewel. And now to lubricate that area. When I put the gear train back together and I put the barrel in and barrel bridge on, screwed everything down, I noticed that there was this odd thing happening where I was getting backspin before I was supposed to. The interaction between the barrel and the center wheel was ever so off that there should be some freedom, some side shape between those two, and there wasn't enough. So what was happening is it was getting closer together, and when it would push back on itself. And that was causing this backspin, not the usual thing where it's about the mainspring. That wasn't that. And then I'm looking closer at the main plate and I see there is this slight dent. And that dent in the main plate is probably what's causing that sort of warp, is what's been causing this all along. What I'm going to try to do, because I want to try to save this as much of the original parts of this watch as possible, is I'm actually going to try to re-flatten the main plate, basically put it back into true, and see if that solves the issue. First, I'm just observing the overcoil, and I noticed there is a bend. This has been manipulated in the past by somebody that didn't really know what they were doing. Basically, you see that there's this bend here, and then it kind of flattens out, which it shouldn't really do. It should be more curved, and then it's out of beat. So first what I'll do is I'll just put it in beat. Okay, so there's the dot there. That shows where the beat should be, and you see it's off center. It's not in line. So I'm going to turn this at the collet first, just get it in beat, and then put it back on the balance, and then see if that does the trick. I'm not crazy about this pallet fork. The angle of lock, extreme. Let's see, it's not mislocking too much. If it was mislocking, then we would, when I do this, it would jump back and forth. Right. But let's try this. Let's see what happens. A little work to do on getting that beat error correct, but at least we've got a straight line. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this off. So this watch was really an interesting watch to work on because it presented quite a number of challenges. Firstly, the hairspring was very messed up. I needed to flatten and center it, so both dimensions. I needed to rebush pretty much everything because the main plate had actually been slightly warped, so I had to try to retrue the main plate. We were able to correct timing errors and issues. Initially, we weren't getting anything over 200 in the verticals, but now it's doing just fine in the verticals over 200. It's actually got a pretty tight delta, only about 14 seconds over across 6 positions. So for a watch from 1959, I'm very happy with how it came out. But this is also a really great example of why it's so important to service old watches, is because they don't get any better if you leave them alone. What ends up happening is the oils dry out and dirt ingresses, and the more that these things run and move, the more that they deteriorate and basically sort of tear themselves apart. So it's important to service them and keep them serviced fairly regularly at around a 6-year, 5-year interval, because that's sort of when the oils dry up. There's some very strong military provenance to this particular watch. It makes it even that much more interesting. So hope you enjoy it. Very rare 5510 Rolex Submariner Milsub for the Australian military.